Today we're diving into one of the most unbelievable family dramas in the history of business. Seriously, it's a story about two brothers, about unimaginable wealth, and a fall from grace so extreme you'd think it was written for a movie.
So, let's set the stage. The year is 2008. Anil Ambani's net worth? A cool $42 billion. That didn't just make him rich, it made him the sixth richest person on the entire planet. And get this, at that very moment, he was actually wealthier than his older brother, Mukesh. He was at the absolute pinnacle, on top of the world.
And then, fast forward just 12 years, he's in a London courtroom, and he says this, from $42 billion to zero. I mean, how? How on earth does a collapse that massive even happen? Well, that's the big question we're going to unpack right now.
To really get how this all went down, we've got to rewind way back. See, the problems between Mukesh and Anil, they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The cracks started forming a long time ago, even while their legendary father, Dhirubhai Ambani, was still calling the shots.
I mean, these two brothers were like night and day. Seriously, you had Mukesh, the quiet one, the introvert. He was the operator, the guy who was obsessed with getting these massive mega projects done on time and under budget. And then you had Anil, the complete opposite, the charismatic extrovert, the showman. He was the public face of the company, schmoozing with politicians, the media, the big shot financiers. And these totally different styles, well, they were basically a recipe for a future collision.
And, looking back, the warning signs were all there. For one, their dad always seemed to prefer Mukesh, giving him the bigger roles. Then Anil goes and marries a Bollywood star, which his dad was not happy about, and that just added more tension. But the real flashpoint, Mukesh supposedly pushed Anil out of Reliance Infocom, a project Anil was super passionate about. By 1999, the business was basically split into two camps, Team Mukesh and Team Anil. So after their father passed away, things got ugly and very public. Eventually, their mother stepped in and hammered out a truce. In 2005, the great Reliance empire was officially split in two. Now, pay attention to this part because it's crucial. Mukesh got the old-school, stable businesses, the stuff that was already a cash-printing machine. Anil, he got the flashy, new-age stuff, telecom, power, and finance. Sure, they looked exciting, with huge potential, but they were also incredibly cash-hungry. They needed a ton of money just to keep running, which, you can probably guess, was setting him up for some big problems.
So you might think, okay, they split the company, feud's over, right? Wrong. The fight wasn't over at all. It just moved from behind closed doors out into the open, onto the public stock market. And that truce, it lasted about 5 minutes. For Anil, the fallout was, well, it was instant and it was brutal.
It was like a domino effect of disaster for Anil. First, he has this massive IPO for his company Reliance Power. Then, on day 2, the stock price just tanks after a mysterious share dump. Then, he's about to close a huge, game-changing deal with a South African telecom giant. And who steps in to block it? His brother, Mukesh. On top of all that, major government contracts his companies had already won, poof, suddenly canceled.
At this point, Anil is probably thinking, this can't just be bad luck. It's too much, too fast. And he starts saying it out loud, publicly blaming Mukesh for his business problems. And that's the big question, isn't it? Was this just two brothers playing hardball in the business world, or was someone actively, deliberately trying to sabotage Anil Ambani? And that question leads us right into the craziest, most intense chapter of this whole story, the war for gas. And I'm not exaggerating when I call it a war. This wasn't just some disagreement over a contract. This was an all-out battle that dragged in the highest levels of the Indian government and would basically seal the fate of Anil's biggest project.
Okay, so here's how it went down. As part of that big 2005 family split, Mukesh had promised to sell natural gas to Anil's new power plants at a super low price. Anil's whole business plan was built on this promise. But then, all of a sudden, a government ministry, led by a family associate, steps in and says, nope, the price is actually going to be almost double that. Naturally, this whole mess ends up in the Supreme Court.
And while this legal battle is going on, things take a very dark, very scary turn. In April 2009, a technician working on Anil Ambani's personal helicopter finds pebbles and soil inside the fuel tank. Let me repeat that, pebbles and soil. Experts said if that helicopter had taken off, it would have crashed, no question. And then it gets even more disturbing. Just a few days later, that same technician, he was found dead on a railway track. The feud had escalated to a truly dangerous level. In the end, it all came down to the Supreme Court, and their ruling was a bombshell. They basically said natural resources like gas belong to the country,
not to private companies. This meant that private family deal between the brothers was worthless. The court went with the higher government-set price. And just like that, the entire financial model for Anil's flagship power project was completely destroyed. It was a fatal blow. Mukesh had won the gas war.
Losing the gas war was a massive hit for Anil, but believe it or not, it was only the beginning of the end. What followed was a perfect storm: crippling debt, more failed deals, and then one last crushing move from his brother that would bring Anil's whole empire crashing down.
So remember how Anil's businesses were cash-hungry? Well, now they were starving. The amount of debt he took on is just mind-blowing. In 2010, it was around 300 billion rupees. By 2017, 430 billion. And then just 1 year later, it exploded to over 1,720 billion rupees. The whole thing was just a runaway train of debt, completely out of control.
And right at this moment, with Anil's telecom company literally drowning in debt, struggling to stay afloat, guess who decides to make a move? Mukesh Ambani. He re-entered the telecom business, the exact business that was supposed to be Anil's crown jewel, with a new company called Reliance Jio.
And Mukesh didn't just enter the market, he detonated it. He launched Jio by offering everything, data, calls, everything, for free. Absolutely free. It started a price war so brutal that nobody else could survive. It was a killer move designed to wipe out the competition. And for Anil's company, which was already on life support, this was the final nail in the coffin.
After Jio, the end came fast. It was just one failure after another. A last-minute merger that could have saved him collapsed. Desperate deals to sell off assets all fell through. Before you know it, his flagship telecom company is filing for insolvency. And then, the ultimate low point. A court orders him to personally pay a massive debt to a Swedish company, Ericsson, or go to prison.
So there he is, Anil Ambani, facing actual jail time. And who steps in? Their mother, Kokilaban. For the last time, she goes to Mukesh and asks him to save his little brother. And he does. Mukesh pays the entire debt, saving Anil from prison. It was this incredibly dramatic final act. The rivalry, the feud, the war, it was finally, definitively over.
And that brings us right back to the very beginning, to that London courtroom. Why was he there? He was being sued by 3 Chinese banks for a loan of nearly $1 billion. And his defense, his statement to the court, was this. He claimed he had nothing left. From the 6th richest man in the world to zero. The fall was complete. You know, this whole story is just a wild ride of ambition, family drama, and mind-boggling money. But it really makes you think, doesn't it? It leaves you with this one big question. When you see a story like this, a story of unbelievable riches and a complete catastrophic collapse, what in the end is the true measure of wealth?